Hello, ladies, and welcome to Joyful Homemaking. Ashley and I are really excited about today's podcast because it is something we've actually walked through and that we're living out right now. And we want to talk to you guys a little bit about the transition or the foundation needed to go from toddlers to teens. And you might be thinking, my teen years are so far away. I have like little ones or just toddlers. This is the perfect podcast for you today. Or if you're listening and you're like, I'm already in the teen stage. Oh no, what do I do? Do not worry. We serve a sovereign God who has a plan. And we also pray that today's podcast would be encouraging to you as well. So, Ashley, thanks so much for being here and joining us and your wealth of wisdom.
Yay.
This was actually, yeah, yay. This idea actually came from Ashley in one of our conversations in the week. And I just love it. I love how she's like, well, how did my rambling get us here? Well, it's because it's out of the heart. You're just telling us about what's going on and the things and the fruit that you've seen. So, to give a little bit of an introduction today, I feel like we hear the expression a lot like parenting is a long game or it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I think that those things are said and like understood to a degree that, there's years, right, that take place. There's different seasons for different things. But I think that kind of what we want to focus on today is in light of that known information that parenting is a long game, is that we want to encourage the investment in the little years because those little deposits of investment show up again in the teenage years. And it's kind of funny to think like toddler to teen, but what you do now matters for what happens later. So, Ashley, you have some teens. Well, you have one that is about to be a teen in like a week from now.
Yeah. And a teen.
And then you will be,
teen.
and
yeah.
Yes. So we are very excited to kind of hear some wisdom and some stories about how those translate. I am in the preteen stage and I'm going to be like boom, boom, boom with the teenagers here coming. But you can even see these deposits and this investment in the toddler years play out in those preteen years as well. So hopefully we can give you some good practical wisdom, some good theological or big picture vision for your parenting as you parent toddlers or young children. And so that's our theme for today. It's gonna be really good. I'm really excited. I wanted to start off with just a quick story, and then Ashley, feel free to piggyback. But when I had just little kids, I had 5 kids under 5, like really fast in a row, fast and furious, and it was an active time for sure. And I felt like my focus was very like narrow on like just a little bit of like survival, a little bit of in the trenches. And then I would look out at these families that had the teenagers and the well-behaved, respectful teenagers. And thankfully I was bold enough to ask, but I was like, how did you get here? I'm only seeing these toddlers right now. And I know here on the podcast, we've shared stories about like things that they have counseled and wisdom, like do weekly date nights with your spouse or find one-on-one time with your kids. And all of that, quite frankly, felt overwhelming when I was in the season because I was like, I don't have time for that. What am I going to do? But I think the biggest takeaway from these Titus 2 moms who had teenagers or older kids, even preteens, that they were all very respectful and helpful and engaged in the family. I think my biggest takeaway was they would remind me that early training during these years that I was doing it when I was in the trenches, early training is not harsh. Like the world says, don't tell your kid no, just let them be a kid, all these. No, no, no. The discipline and the discipleship is actually a loving preparation for these preteen or teenage years. So the investment that you put in now is the payoff later. And sometimes it's hard to have that like big picture or that idea of like, I'm putting in all of this work right now and I'm not going to see it until later. But then, praise the Lord, you have these Titus 2 women in your life that you're like, okay, I see it played out in your kids. And I'm the one that came to you and asked. So now I see what I need to do to get to that point. Did you have any moments actually when you had young ones where you were like, okay, I see these other moms and either got wisdom from them or was like, okay, I need to put this into practice or anything like that?
Yes. Oh, definitely. And I think we see the bad examples and the good examples, right? So we see I mean, thank God that he shows us those things too, like what we don't want our children, how we don't want our children turning out versus what we see the fruit of the children that have been consistently discipled, consistently disciplined, in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And that's what we want. And so, and so to see that, I think the thing that always would instill in me, was just to keep on going, like to be consistent, because we are told to not grow weary in doing good. And the reason is because we can grow weary in doing good. Like it is actually really exhausting to parent intentionally, like what we're talking about, and to be on top of the discipline. And I think, you really realize very early on that what you're disciplining for is really attitude over anything else. And that was something I had a couple different times where that would strike me as like seeing the attitude of my child is, their heart was spilling over to their attitude. And so that was what I needed to discipline for was the bad attitude and not always the bad action, because sometimes the bad action didn't come with a bad attitude. They were just being silly, or they didn't, and there was still correction given, but it's always the heart posture that needed to be corrected. And of course, there's so much that we can do, but it's going to be the Holy Spirit. Like it's our prayers for our children, and the Holy Spirit that's actually going to change their heart posture, as they grow older. And I think just for our listeners to know, I think that you and I have, kind of unique perspectives into this. Because you are doing the range of parenting those toddlers while you are also parenting those preteens. So you see it all the way through. I had a couple years where it was like I had really littles that I was still having to do the little disciplining of like, okay, look at me. Mom says no. If you do it one more time, I'm going to have to do the spanking. It's like that really little sort of toddler discipline. And then at the same time, you're also trying to span that to like where you're having those like heart talks. You're like, I can't spank this child anymore, but like they know better. And anyway, so that's such a wide span. So I think that you have the wisdom because you're in both of those places. I have this unique perspective now that I'm working in a school, primarily with, let's see, the youngest kids I'm working with are like 12 because I teach 7th grade through 10th grade, but I'm around kids that are 7th grade through 12th grade. So I feel like I have this unique perspective where I get to see the fruit of a lot of different parents' work. And then also the things that you think, it's interesting that this child cannot accept the grade that they were given, or, and you start thinking, what do you need to work on in the toddler years so that by the time they're at this point, their attitude is better. And, I think, I don't know if we want to just like launch into like pitfalls. But one thing that I see, and I would love to get your perspective on how to start working on this in the toddler years. But one thing I see, and I think it's a cultural thing, I also have to remind myself of like when COVID hit for all these kids too, like what were their ages? What were they doing? Like, I think that that has had a really big impact on the kids that weren't just didn't just continue on with life as normal, like some of us homeschoolers, you know, like things just looked very different for their families and they were suddenly thrown into different learning environments or their parents. But one pitfall I see is a is like a blame thing in our society where kids can't take on they won't take the blame for something that they have done incorrectly. And I'm not saying this across the board. This is just something I'm consistently seeing as like, oh, this is something I need to look for in my own kids and correct it if I see it, is like trying to source out the blame for like, well, it can't be my fault that this happened type of a thing. And I just think that's something we really need to look at even in our toddlers and to work on. And you think about those little kid fights of like, he started it, she started it. Well, I hit her because I took the toy, but she had taken it first. And it's like, that might not seem like a big deal when they're little, but now it's played out in the fact that they're fighting with, their teacher in 8th grade over the score they got on a test or whatever it might be. And it's like, this is how it's going to play out. And again, that's fine. Like, if people have questions, obviously, like, I'm the teacher, I will answer why they got the score they did, whatever. There's nothing wrong with asking, but it's that like, this couldn't possibly be my fault that I got this score. This couldn't possibly be my fault that this wasn't turned. Anyway, again, great students. I'm not trying to say, but this is something that I can it's like, okay, you start to see further out, how is this going to play out later in life? If it's in your toddler now, what's it going to look like in your teenager? So I don't know. What do you think about that issue in particular?
I think that's definitely relevant for all ages. I definitely see blame shifting, like, well, they hit me first, or like you use the example, I had the toy first, and it's never like an acknowledgement of the action or reaction that you had, but how to get the other person to be the one to be at fault, so then you get what you want. And I know, like, in our family, and I know you did this too, just have like a lot of like key phrases or visual explanations for taking personal responsibility for things. So, like, if they come to me and they have like an accusation against a sibling, I wouldn't use the word accusation right away when they're a toddler, but like if they came and were blaming someone else, so and so did this, my first question was, what was your role, or what did you do, or what were you responsible?
Yep.
And when they were young, we would use the visual, like if you were pointing at someone, that one finger is pointing at them, but you have all of your other fingers pointing at you. So what are you responsible for in blaming someone else? And one of my worries was that if I went down that approach, that they wouldn't come to me anymore because they wouldn't like my answer. But fear not, moms, they still come to you. They come to you a lot. And so finding a way to make sure to communicate that in situations, there's always two parties, and each party is responsible for their own action. And to look at the Bible verse about taking the log out of your own eye first. So to take good inventory of what you did, and soon, like really young, I feel like we talked about the word retaliation, and they have something that they did because they were upset, frustrated, retaliating against whatever maybe a sibling did or a friend. And in that retaliation, they are responsible for whatever they did. They are responsible if they retaliated in a negative way and they would get a consequence, or they were responsible if they chose to not retaliate and do something different, like find a different toy or ask for it when they're done or whatever, using that toy example. And then they were rewarded for that. So, not trying to teach our kids to be passive and not stand up for themselves, but to acknowledge that some things are worth, standing up for and some things aren't. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was a little harder for my truth and justice kids. Some of my kids are just go with the flow. They'll find something else fun to do. But the ones that are like strong justice, they still struggle with that today. Well, so and so did this. Well, what did you do? Like what was your response in it? I remember when I was talking to some of those Titus 2 women when I was a young mom, they kept using the phrase, win their hearts, win the hearts of your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very confusing to me, that expression. And honestly, like now, even like almost 8 kids in, I still don't really know if I know that expression. But what I think it means is that you need to look at, like you mentioned, the heart condition of your kid. And so I can tell you, I have a few strong justice, that I know that that's going to be their bent. And so that is what I address then when a conflict comes up. I know that you really value what is right and wrong and standing up for truth. And then we talk about, is this situation something that you are willing to go to bat for? Or is this situation something that can be resolved in a different way? Can you offer to play together? Can you find a different toy? Can you be a leader and show how to share, especially if you're older? And then my other kids that aren't as justice driven, maybe they're more peacekeeper, peacemaker type of kids. I have to make sure that their hearts are aware that it is good and right to be generous and kind and patient with others. But also, if someone is just picking on you because they know that they can pick on you, then you need to learn how to communicate with love and peace to get that conflict resolved too.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe winning the hearts of your kids is knowing their hearts and knowing your kids know that that you are for them, that you are helping them to become who they're meant to be in Christ. And I know we say this all the time, but we're not raising boys and raising girls. We're raising young men and young ladies, like we're raising them up to be that. And we see that in the teenage years that, we're shaping adults, not just managing tiny little crisis everywhere.
Right.
People are like, oh, I'm the chaos coordinator. And I am a chaos coordinator. Like I do coordinate a lot of people's lives, but that's not my job.
Right.
I am raising future brothers and sisters in Christ. That is my job. And one pitfall I was going to bring up, Ashley, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, is that I think when you have a high sense of like being an ambassador for Christ and raising up, the future Christians of this world, sometimes I think the pitfall can be you can fall into the control mindset. Like, I'm going to control my kids, control the settings, control the conversations, control everything. And I do think it is important to have like a tighter rein on toddlers so that when they are teenagers, you can loosen and give more freedom. And we can get into that more. But I think that when we think that we are in control and forget that we are just the vessels that God is using, then I think that we limit not only our kids' ability to learn and grow and advocate, but I think we lose their hearts when it's all about control and not about the heart of the child. What do you think?
Yeah. Yes. I think it's so true. And I think it, especially, as we talk to like homemakers and homeschoolers, it can be, it's a huge temptation to want to control every little micromanage every situation, control everything all the time. But then of course the problem is, so what about when you're not there? to put the words in their mouth that they should be saying to their sibling or peer or whatever every moment. And yeah, we're, like you said, we're raising adults here. We're not raising them to be children forever. They're going to have to figure out how to live in the real world without their mother, yeah, micromanaging them. And I think it's a good point that you're making about toddlers, because so often people have these cute little toddlers and they don't think that they need any discipline because they're just toddlers and they don't know better. But then when they become teenagers, well, now they need to be disciplined because now they're being naughty. Well, it should really be the opposite, right? Like at this point with my 15-year-old, I should not have to be having little conversations with him. Look at me. Did you hear what I said? Like that. I should not have to be having disciplinary conversations with him all the time. Every once in a while, if I see things in his heart or in his life or, and obviously my husband too, but I'm with him a lot more. And so if I just see things come up, or maybe even just red flags of people he's around or something I just want him to be aware of, like those are going to be like a heart-to-heart conversation while we're driving somewhere. That's not going to look like discipline like it does when they're a toddler and they do something that they know is incorrect. They were being disobedient, and then you have to correct it through discipline. And so I just think it's so important to remember you want to keep those reins in tight when they're younger, and then you want to let that go when they're older. And that's really how it should be. And that's how fellowship then continues on between you and your child, because now you really, before you're holding those reins in tight, you're disciplining, you're making sure that they are being obedient, that they're learning obedience. And then as you loosen it up, then before you know it, you are walking side by side. You are working together, and you're not just like you're talking about trying to control or manage everything all the time. And I do think, again, especially homemakers and stay at home, homeschooling moms, it can really be a temptation. And it can be like almost a selfish temptation too, because you're like, I just want peace in this house. I just want people to not argue or to not mess things up or to not. And so then you are, trying to micromanage every situation, which is exhausting also. So,
Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
And like, I think we need to remember that the teenage years reveal to us what the toddler years were sowing. So whether that is you're being controlling, or it could be the opposite and you were being passive and not instilling traits. Like when you brought up the friends, I feel like I've just talked to my kids about this multiple times, like from toddlers to young children and now to like preteens. Sometimes, coming back again to that toy analogy, sometimes I would tell my toddler, like, if you're not enjoying playing with so and so because they keep taking your things or they're not thinking of you, then go find somebody else to play with. Like, I know that sounds very little, I guess, but then as they get older, like to to young children, it would be more like, how does that person make you feel when you are playing with them? Do they include you? Do they like to talk to you about what interests you too, or is it just about them? And then now fast forward to preteen years, is that person reflecting godly character that you want to be around? So it's like a progression, but that skill, conversation, whatever, does happen even from a toddler, right? Or I wrote down a few like practical wisdom points, and you already brought one up, Ashley, that I think is so good. But like toddlers learning first time obedience from their parents is not just a gift right now for the peace of your home and because the Bible asks you to honor and obey your parents, but it's a future gift for like your teacher or coaches or an employee. Also, like when you have first time obedience, you are cultivating a character quality that is responsive to counsel, in their teenage years. And you want that, or if you ask your teenager, can you take out the trash? It has been instilled in them, not through control, but through discipleship, that we obey right away, all the way, and with a happy heart. And you don't have to have necessarily those consequences. Am I saying teenagers are perfect? No. Like Ashley said, you're probably going to have a lot of conversations, but just the habit, the habitual, process of obeying your parents first time, like not being slow to obey, like delayed obedience, not doing it or complaining, which the Proverbs tell us not to do. So those little things are easier to practice as toddlers than to transform a teenager's heart to want to do those. Are they easy because toddlers obey the first time right away, all the way? No, there's a lot of training that goes into that, but there is small mercies and blessings in those toddler years when you start to see little steps of fruit before you even get to the teenage years and you see the mega fruit, the
Mhm.
fruit that has been on the vine forever. Um, Another one for toddlers that I think is hard to train, but so good to train is self-control, right?
Mhm.
Like again, actually, like self-control of emotions. And when you can learn as a toddler to identify triggers that cause you to be emotional in one way or another, you are most definitely going to have those in the preteen and teenage years that you're
Mhm.
going to have to revisit. Hey, so what are some strategies to help you maintain self control, especially when all your hormones are going crazy in your teen years, right? And they're not going to have those hormones when they're toddlers, but they are going to learn skills and they're going to learn the necessity to have self control. Because without self control, I think they, even as toddlers, they feel out of control and then they react out of control. And then
Mhm.
that is not just harmful or hurtful for the family, but for them. I think that's why even in counseling today, they say just hug your child when they're out of control because they feel out of the box. They feel like they're going a million places, and having that comfort and control. Well, as a teenager, I'm very affectionate with my kids, but I'm not going to be there or at church, like if they're in youth group or if they're at a friend's house or whatever, I'm not going to be there just to hold them. They're going to need
Mhm.
to figure it out on their own. What do you think about those two before I go into more?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of good points. I do think, like, especially with thinking about self control and toddlers, so often excuses can be made, especially by moms. I'm sure that I did this when my kids were little of you have a kid that throws themselves down or something and you're like, "Oh, they didn't get a long enough nap, they're hungry." Well, guess
Yeah.
what? As they get older, they're not always going to get perfect sleep and they're not always going to have perfect blood sugar levels. So, you actually need to like teach them as toddlers that they need to um they need to be using that self-control even if they're hungry, even if they're tired, like even and that might seem terrible, especially as a mother, because we think that that's our job as a mother, which it is, especially when they're younger. Like it is our job to make sure they're fed and they're getting enough sleep, etc., like getting to nap on time. But it just that's not life. That doesn't always work out that way, especially like you've got older kids that have got to go places, like life just happens. You're not always going to be able to have everybody in perfect homeostasis all the time. And so if they can't learn as a toddler to control themselves, like what's going to happen if they didn't get very much sleep because they had to finish that paper and then they ran out of the house and dropped their toast and they didn't have breakfast and then they get to school or they get to co-op or youth group, whatever it might be, and they're having a big emotional time of it. Like it is not cute when they're a preteen teenager having a hard time And the excuses, again, I think this goes back again to just like making excuses for our sinful behavior, when it's like, no, you gotta pull yourself together and learn some self-control. Even if you're tired, even if you're hungry, even if you're upset about
Mm-hmm.
something, like you still just have to learn that, because we all know adults that haven't learned that yet, and it's not cute. It's not good. So I think that's a really good point. Um I was writing down just a couple other, I think your point about friendship is like you were talking about, like just through the stages of kind of guiding them through like what makes a good friend. And that, honestly, that could be a whole podcast episode of itself, I think,
Yeah.
just like talking about like, how do we guide our kids toward good friendships? I was having a conversation recently. It was like a discussion in a ninth, 10th class that I teach. And we were discussing how at their age, good friends should be calling you out on things. Like if they see something in you that's a bad trait or it's a sin problem. And one kid said, I don't know if I've ever had a friend call me out. And I was like, maybe you should think about who your friends are then, like that, like it's that kind of stuff. And it was kind of quiet for a minute, because they're all sort of like, oh, but, and again, these are great kids, but it's something to think about, like if you're a teenager, and that's awkward when you're a teenager, but to teach your kids to also be the kind of person that's not going around bossing people, but that's also saying like, hey, the way you just talked to your mom was not okay. That was disrespectful. Like maybe you shouldn't do that. Or, and I will say too, I see enough of it in the classroom, them calling each other out on things and being like, hey, like they're being good kids. But I think that that's an important thing as they get into their teen years, that they have friends that will keep them accountable and keep them walking with the Lord. And I love seeing like my own kids having friends that are like, hey, what book are you in the Bible? What's a verse you're memorizing right now? Like they're keeping them even accountable in their relationship with the Lord. And anyway, so that's just, it's a blessing. And that's something to think about as like going into the teen years of like, you don't just want friends that have good virtues. You want them to also be calling your kids out on them if they're not doing the same thing. So anyway, did you have a thought before I?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's so good. And I was thinking, with that, like with the friendship conversation, also comes like a respect for authorities, like when they're a toddler, to listen to those in authority over you. And like that is particularly your parents. And not that friends have authority over you, but in reference to like if you had a conversation with one of your kids when they were older and you were like, hey, I don't think that this I think you should pray and consider if this friend or this person that you're receiving counsel from is wise, for
Mhm.
you to be around. I think that, in the toddler years, we're establishing authority as we listen and obey those that are above us. But even in the toddler year, like you are to listen and obey mom and dad. But if someone else asks you to do something and that goes against what I have said or goes against what the Bible says, then you are not to respect them. You are not to listen to them. You're to come get mom and dad. And I think that also translates into friends and wise counsel as they get older too. Um, and the self-control element, I was just thinking like in the teenage years is not just self control of like your emotional regulations, but also self control of things that you do like with conflicts and like screen time and like dating, or I don't know, like it's a skill set that like seems very narrow focused when they're a toddler, like because it really goes in with more like body control and emotional control. But I think
Mhm.
it has a lot of repercussions later in the teenage realm when you don't establish those early. But what were some other ones you thought?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Oh, I just one thing I was thinking about too, just I think this is just it's kind of like a mind shift transition that I have especially had to sort of embrace lately. And this actually goes along with friendship, because you're teaching them like so many things. You're teaching them when they're little so that you can let go of those reins, right? So you're teaching them as they're growing up what to look for in a friend, because, and when they're little, you're around all their friends, right? Or you probably should be like there, like there's play dates going on, or you're with the parents, you're watching the interactions between kids and other parents, you're watching your interactions of your kids with other kids. Well, by the time they're teenagers, you are not present all the time to be watching all the interactions. And if you are, there's a word for that, and I believe it's helicopter mom, I think is the term. Like you just, like that's no longer your role, is to be micromanaging, like we were talking about. Like when they're a teenager, you just shouldn't be there all the time. I mean, it's okay, like I'm at events with my kids all the time, but I'm not like keeping an eye on them and like listening to their conversations. And like this is not, it's just not what I'm doing when they're teenagers. But I think the other thing that goes along with this, there seems to be in sort of like the intentional parenting movement, sort of, which again, that's great. The people are wanting to intentionally parent. I think that's great. But there seems to be sort of this whole idea that like you have these kids in order to spend quality time with them. Like that's like the goal of parenting is like quality time. Like, and the more quality time you can get, like the better your parenting, sort of. And I think quality time is very important. And especially right now, I have to protect that and I have to carve out time for that, because now we have this school that my kids are in half the day. And so I'm not just like around them all the time. So it's something I have to be intentional about. But I also like, it's actually not even possible in our schedules for me to try to just like get all this like one-on-one time with each of them. And so I have to be a lot more intentional about like if I'm driving somewhere with one of them, or if somebody's in the front seat and I'm having a conversation, or I'm walking with them to the mailbox, or whatever it might be. But I also like, as they're getting older, as I'm releasing those reins to my teenagers, the goal of our relationship is not just for me to be with them all the time. And I think that that's hard, especially maybe parents of like little toddlers, to think about like, no, I need to treasure up as much time with them as I can possibly get before they leave the house. And I think that I've like fallen into that sort of thought process before, where like my parenting is based on how much time I spend with my kids, sort of an idea. But that's not the goal of parenting. And as they get older, it's going to become less and less important that you're with them consistently all the time. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think, again, I think it's that like we want to tighten the reins and start like white knuckling it even more as they get older, because we see them getting older and it can be kind of hard to think about that and the fact that they're going to be leaving the house, in a few years or whatever it might be. And so again, I think it's like, but we need to remember like that transition is happening, and you're probably just not going to be with them as much. They're going to get involved in things outside of school. They're going to get friends, like sports. There's going to be things that happen, and you're just, the goal of your relationship as your child gets older is not to be with them all the time. Anyway, what do you think about that?
Yeah, when you were talking, it kind of just made me think about like when they're toddlers and then the transition into teens, you really are developing and creating a family culture. And within that family culture, you have family values and like things that are really meaningful to your family, or things that you are passionate about. And when they are toddlers or young children, you have great influence because you are with them the majority of your day. These can be things too within a family culture, like family Bible time. That's a routine, right? Like you and your family, or at least our family has developed. I know you guys had different routines that I have admired over the years, like game night, and you guys also do a family Bible time. And family hunting trips. And anyways, I know seasons change and routines change. And as kids get older, things change. I do think that even just because I'm speak for you because I know you, but hopefully it comes out right. But even as we release reins, and even as we know that we are not going to be with our children 24/7 like they were when they were toddlers, there are some things that are important, that are those like maybe pillars or habits that you've created. And like you can fast forward too and like think about like adults. Like we have those things with our families anyways right now, like holidays. Most people spend time with their families on holidays, you know? And I think you can still cultivate a family culture around certain missional things in your family. Let's say it's a breakfast or it's a landing place for family Bible time. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that we need to remember that it's not going to be an all day thing once they get older, you know? So, like, kind of like you people say, pick and choose your battles, like, pick and choose your routines or your pillars or your things that you want to go for bat for your family. Some people like I grew up in a public school where I was very involved in sports and music and leadership, and there was not a lot of like family dinners when I was in the high school realm. And as an adult, sometimes I'm like, I would have rather, you know, but you're given one life and you're making choices. But there are people, or there are times in my growing up that I could see my family culture, my parents really carved out like a week camping family trip, and that was
Mm-hmm.
important to
Mm-hmm.
them. So I think that we can, each individual family, as our kids grow into those teenage years, keep that mindset of like, what is our family culture?
Mm-hmm.
But we kind of need to start that at toddlers. Don't you feel like that family culture of like, hey, do you want to walk with me to the mailbox and I'm going to ask you like three really deep questions and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to respond to me, is not just like, oh, okay, teenager, we're going to try this new thing, you
Right.
know,
Yes. Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing that your whole toddler and childhood, you know? But now that our time, because of the freedom of the reins, is shorter and more intensified, that if you haven't cultivated that relationship when they were younger, then that mailbox walk is just gonna not
Be awkward.
transpire the way that you think it's gonna go in your head. What do you think?
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, okay, so I totally agree. And I agree with family culture. Like our thing is like dinner together, you know,
Yeah.
and like thankfully my kids go to a half day school so they can all be involved in extracurriculars, which they basically all are right now. Um, and we can do all the extracurriculars and still be home in time to get some schoolwork done, get dinner, and all sit down together, you know, and like that's a huge blessing. That's one of the reasons we like this
Huge.
school is half day. So which is awesome. But I think there tends to be sometimes this, and okay. This is like one of those things that I have to be careful because I understand there's lots of different reasons people make the decisions they do. But I see a lot of times moms that feel maybe like I just need more time with my own kids. And so I'm going to tell them that they can't do anything outside the home, basically, or we're not going to be involved. Are there times that you shouldn't be involved in things outside the home for different reasons? Yes, all the disclaimers, blah, 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 blah. However, if it's just the selfish, they're growing up too fast, I need more time with them. I don't want them playing soccer because I can't be there, or like that's just time that they're going to be. I think that we just have to be careful and remember, like, okay, what are we doing? We're shaping people. Lord willing, we are shaping people into successful, God-fearing adults. Like that is the point of what we're doing. And so if we're going to say, they can't do anything outside the home, or they can't do anything away from me, because like the whole point of me is like the whole point of this relationship is just for me to spend a bunch of time with them. Like that's just selfishness, right? Like we have to think like what things has the Lord put in their lives that will actually help them become the people that we want them to become, right? Or that he wants them to become is really the goal. So anyway, I think that was kind of like what I was trying to say is like, don't,
Sorry.
what was that?
Sorry, hopefully I didn't derail what you were trying to
No,
say. Anyway.
no. I think you made a really good point about like, and you and Darren are so intentional too about like family culture. What is important to us? Obviously, family Bible study, family dinners, like these are all like so important. But I think it's just something I see, and something that I know I've been guilty of before, is like I don't want my kids doing certain things because like I just want time with them, or I just want them home with me. And then sometimes too, and there are like sometimes parents are like, well, I still need to be disciplining them and keeping an eye on them, and like like totally there are. I have older kids that I can see now. If I didn't let my son do all these things he wants to do as a 15-year-old because I wanted to spend time with him, like that would just be selfish. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, and
Anyway.
I feel like I just read something from Doug Wilson about particularly the difference for boys and girls too as they get older into those teenage years, where when they're toddlers and they're young children, it is good and right for them to spend a lot of time with mom and dad, I mean obviously. But as they progress into more preteen teenage years, it is very healthy for especially young men to have other godly men of influence in their lives. And I know that a lot of influence has come from like sports or activities outside the home. And maybe sports could be something that's just kind of like a quote unquote easy transition because they're teaching like hard work and teamwork and stuff like that. And I know, looking at my kids, I don't think all of them will be interested in like that type of, well, I can't say that. My assumption is that they might not all be wanting certain types of sports and teams, but I do want to make sure that for my boys, as we're moving into this year, that they do have opportunities, one, to learn from godly men, two, to learn what teamwork and being part of a unified collection is, whether that's sports or what have you. um, it could be like a 4-H program or Civil Air Patrol or whatever, just like a unifying together, right? And then I also want them to learn accountability for their time management, for their actions outside of the home, as they are a reflection of our family too. So I can see where you're saying all those things so good. I did, from Douglas Wilson, he mentioned something about to make sure that you have an eye. It doesn't mean like a physical eye, but like an awareness of your girls, because girls tend to gravitate to whatever they're a part of, as like pledging allegiance to that group. So it could be to that sport, it could be to a friend group, it could be to an association that you're a part of, but that they just bond with the people instead of necessarily learning the character traits of like the boys do.
Mm,
So all that to say, you're making that foundation, when they're toddlers and
mhm,
when they're young kids, and then you're learning. You are the being the great student of your children, where you know about them, about their strengths, about their weaknesses. Some people need bigger movement activities, some people need more intelligent, types of groups. And honestly, like, I'm learning, the boys don't need me. They'll always love me, and I'll always be their mom, but they need something else, a man, a
Mhm.
leader. My husband is wonderful at this, to guide and to lead them into this next stage, where girls, they do still need me, even though they don't
Mhm.
think they do. they,
Right.
they do
Yeah.
in that relational way. And so I don't know, just remembering just to form those relationships really young, as toddlers
Mhm.
and young kids, because then they become these like preteens and teens, and you're like, okay, this is quote unquote a different world, but it's not. It's what you created when they were
Yes.
younger, you know?
Yes.
And like
Yeah.
in, is it in what, oh no, I'm gonna lose what chapter of the book it's of the Bible it's in, but um it talks about that our one of our goals is to turn the hearts of our kids to the Father. And I think
Yeah.
that particularly when they're young, in order, like especially with your boys and your girls too, because you're trying to create a healthy expectation of what a leader looks like. But we can do that as moms when they're toddlers and they're young kids, and we can say like a gratitude and appreciation to our husbands, but we can also be like, Dad cannot wait to see you show him this when he gets home. Or like,
Mhm.
he is going to be so excited to hear this story. Let's save it and let's say it in front of
Mhm.
Dad. You know, like
Yep.
you're so good
Yep.
at those things, actually. Like, really just turning the heart of your toddler and the heart of your child to focus also on Dad, because he doesn't get to be with them as often as we do. Sorry, I
Yeah.
went on a rant. I'm really good at that,
No, that's
Ashley.
a good point. Yeah. No, I think that is, yeah, that's a very good point. And I think, it's like when we were messaging back and forth and I was just saying how much I am not in the toddler phase anymore, but how relevant the toddler phase is to the phase I'm in, because I see my very imperfect work that the Lord still, with his grace, still honored in the way that I can now see fruit from the work I did in my toddlers. And so, like, even though I'm not in the toddler phase, but that toddler phase is still so relevant in my life because I can see now, and the things that I didn't do well. Certainly, there's a lot of things I didn't do perfectly, but some of the things that it's like, okay, there's correction still that needs to happen that maybe would not have to as much if I had been more diligent in this area or that area. And so that's why I think it's just like so important to have these conversations and just to encourage young
Mm-hmm.
women with young toddlers, like, do not grow weary in doing good, do not grow weary in disciplining and discipling, because because you do get to see that fruit or lack thereof in your preteens and your teenagers, and then obviously into adulthood. So and as you are going to have to loosen those reins eventually, you're going to have to let them go off and do things on their own. And if you're not instilling discipline and obedience and love of the Lord and his law in their hearts now, um,
Mm.
then it's really going to show when they become teenagers. So yeah.
Yes, that is so good. What a good wrap up. And I just want to echo that parenting isn't about perfectionism, because we can never obtain that, right? It's all about pointing our children to God. And when we do that as toddlers and as children, young children, even as they get to preteen and to teenagers, if they know God's word, if they know God's heart, then they're going to see you, whether you're repenting because you messed up for something or you're trying to instill a godly character, they're going to know where that comes from. And I think that's going to go really well with them. And I think that even though you said you were not perfect, and I know none of us are, you did such a good job pointing your kids to Christ when they were young, because the fruit obviously is shown even more abounds when they're older. So
By the
this
grace
is
of
such
God.
a good conversation. I feel like there could be so much more said, but that's all these things are, right? Is like sound bites of conversation so that we can continually learn and continually grow to pointing our hearts and lives to Christ. So thank you so much, Ashley.
Oh yeah, thank you. And thank you for your wisdom. And okay, remind everybody. So I love what you would always say to your toddlers. And I think I would say something similar, but not ever as lovely as you said it. You had a little obey. And did you have hand motions too? I remember I would do hand motions every once in a while with my kids, but I don't think I did them again with the consistently enough that my kids ever learned them. But it was like obey right away, all the way with a happy heart. Or what was the hand motion? I'm sure you're still doing this with your littles.
Yeah, I say it all the time. I think they've changed through through the years. My parents, I feel like right now my happy heart is like happy heart, like pointing at my cheek. um, yeah, that's so funny. But right away, sometimes I snap right away because then like when
Mm-hmm.
we're out in public, if I just snap, then that sound and is associated with right away,
Mm-hmm.
and then all the way, yeah, like I don't know, the
Mm-hmm.
circle of the hand all the way,
Yeah.
and then but yeah, I'm saying it like I don't have any tattoos, but if I was ever to get a tattoo, it might be that.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. I think I heard you say it the first time I ever met you, like at karate. I think you were saying it to somebody about something, and it was like, oh, I need to be friends with her. She's
Oh
good
man,
stuff.
that's when I was 5 under 5 too. That's when I was most definitely in the trenches.
Oh man, I know. It's wild to think about those times. Okay, so do we have time? I'm not even keeping track of time. Do we have time for you to tell us anything that's cooking?
Yeah, we have a few quick minutes here. So what's been cooking at our house? We just butchered our Thanksgiving turkeys. So they are chilling right now in preparation for family coming. We raised 5 of them and we kept 3 for ourselves. 1 we donated to a church event and 2 we're having at Thanksgiving. And then we sold the other 2. And it was really fun because the other 2 came from these Christian families that really wanted their kids, specifically their older boy, to come and experience butchering a turkey. And so he came and alongside my kids and he plucked those feathers and he did all the things. And it was really an encouraging time to bring in another father and son and watch them work alongside my husband and my kids to do something like that. And the little boy, he's not little, but the young boy is so excited to help his mom prep it and put it on their Thanksgiving table. And I just think that's so awesome. What's cooking at
How
your
much did they end
house?
up weighing?
Oh, well, we ordered all males, but that's not all what we got. So they're about 20 to 25 pounds each, fully or after they've been, taking out the stuff that we don't want anymore in it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I think I told you, was it last year? Or I think it's the year before, we did our own turkeys. And the biggest one was like 13 pounds. They were so sad. We were like, could not figure it out. I don't know. They were free fed, but they're not smart animals. And
No,
anyway,
that's how our first year. Yeah.
and they would like fly way up into trees, and we'd have to go find them every night to like throw them back in the run, and it was like this is ridiculous. Anyway, yeah. So we haven't done turkeys again since then, but that's awesome. Sounds like you got some big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, at our house, well, what have we been doing? I don't know. So I have 2 in basketball and 1 who is play practice has been ramping up a lot because the big performance is next weekend. So there's a Friday and a Saturday showing for my 5th graders play, and then the other 2 have started basketball. And because our school does not have its own building, basketball is it's like 15, 20 minutes away from the school. So there's like the secondary campus is separate from the elementary campus, and they're both separate from the basketball facility. But then there's like anyway, it's a very funny time right now. It's just a lot of like running people around and like, hurry up, hurry up. Okay, now what are we going to do while we're here for a while, and trying to get things done and help people with homework and get my own lesson plans done and get everybody where they need to be. Anyway, it's fun. It's all good. And my kids both of the older kids have never played on basketball team before, but they love it. So it's great. And
That's
it
awesome.
is, I really like both their coaches. And again, it's nice just to have like they're both pastors, actually, both of their coaches. And just to have my son have, like we were talking about, like just another male godly figure.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's doing Bible studies with them. He's coaching them, but he's doing it in a way. Yes. And he's honoring the Lord and teaching them good skills and good, anyway, so it's good. And then I was talking to somebody recently about the fact, like, it's actually really exhausting for my 5th grader who is in like all these play practices or ramping up, and he still has school. He has half day of school, but then he also has homework every night, and he's working hard on homework, but having to, and when we're finishing up piano, they're not going to do piano over the winter. Speaking of just prioritizing different things, it's like that something's got to go. So anyway, he just has a lot on his plate right now. But then the play is next weekend, and then they have a week off for Thanksgiving, which will be awesome and great. And I think it's actually really, really healthy, even for kids. He's just turned 11. So even for an 11-year-old, I think it's really healthy for them to learn how sometimes in life you just have to push really hard to like get things done and to do things well and to like finish that race well. And then after that, then God gives you rest. Like he has a whole week. He can be in his sweatpants playing Legos. So it's like and God does that for all of us, right? Like we see that every Sabbath, right? You push through the week, and then the Lord gives you Sabbath rest. And so, and for him to like learn that, for my kids to learn that, even at a younger age, in a good sort of controlled environment where they're not just like thrown into the workplace or something. I just think it's really healthy. I mean, I'm sure you do similar things with like farm chores or stuff, things like that, where you're like, we got to push, we got to get these things planted. We got to, just work. Okay. And then we can rest. And I think, I don't know, again, I think there's like this tendency of mothers and parents in general just to like really overprotect their kids so that they don't have to ever be uncomfortable. But like, that's not helpful at all to your kids. And so anyway, so it's a good thing. It's pushing me in a lot of ways. It's great.
Well,
It's
you're like
sanctifying.
you're like building a muscle. And when you're working out,
Mm-hmm.
you do that too. You push, and then you have a rest break.
Yep.
And you know what? It's like labor too. I can push really hard for, a couple hours and then the baby.
Mm-hmm.
So
100%. Yeah.
that's good. That's good wisdom for sure. And I see that, it doesn't always feel that way as much in the toddler and the young kids, but as they start getting a little older and can take on more responsibility, I think that's very wise for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Well, next time we podcast, you'll have to tell us how the play went.
Oh yeah, I think it's going to be very silly and fun. So it's hard to attend. So yeah.
Good. Well, thank you, friend. This is always so fun.
Yeah, thank you. It was great. I hope it was encouraging to, especially moms of toddlers, or maybe even just out of that toddler phase. Like, just keep going, keep doing the thing. Yes. You'll get there. So.
And sometimes, like, if you do feel like you're in the trenches, sometimes it is helpful to start thinking about like the future, because it makes your trenches feel worth it, and feel like the work that you're putting in right now, it has meaning. So even if you're like, I can't even imagine being part of a basketball team, you don't have to. But what you can imagine is the characters that you're developing now is going to prepare them for that, whatever that they get involved in. So
yeah. Yeah. Okay. For sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Until next time.
See you next time. Okay.
Bye. Bye.